Hi book friends, I'm Erin, and this is Erin Go Read. It feels like it has been absolutely forever since I filmed here in my office with my bookshelves behind me due to life circumstances. My October wrap-up was filmed in my husband's hospital room with me wearing my absolutely lovely contact precaution yellow gown in his room. And then the last several videos have been vlogs, just because that's the only way I've been able to film and talk about books for the last month or so. So thank you so much for all of those who watched those vlogs and who commented prayers and love for my husband and I while he was in the hospital. He is home. He's doing much better. This is the, let's see, today's Wednesday and he came home on Monday afternoon. So very excited about that. I even have the kids today. So the two older kids are, the kids, by the way, are my two nieces and my nephew, Holly, Sam, and Charlie. Holly and Sam are at school. We went out to breakfast this morning and then I dropped them off at school. They're being picked up by, they're going home with a friend today, so I won't have them for the rest of the day. But I have the baby, Charlotte, who we call Charlie, here today. I thought she was ready for a morning nap. She disagreed, but she is happily playing in the crib right now with some lullabies playing in the background. So she may or may not join us later on in the video. I don't know if you could hear that. I just heard plastic toys crashing. She's fine. Okay, so this is going to be part one of my October, what month is it? This is going to be part one of my November wrap-up. So we have 3 nonfiction, 2 general fiction, and 1 middle grade book that I'm reading, that I read with my husband for Believathon, which is a children's book readathon for the month of November, and that is hosted by Gavin, and his channel is Gavin Hetherington. I will link his channel below. All of these books, by the way, will be linked below in the description box, so if any of these intrigue you, you want to find out more, you can click the link and purchase the book or put it on a wish list or whatever. Christmas is coming. Anyway, as it is Nonfiction November, we're going to start with the 3 nonfiction books that I have read so far this month. This is a amazing 4th Estate matchbook collection edition of The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. That's the dog bumping the... Oh, don't go through the middle of the tripod, please. What are you trying to do? He's just staring at me. They made a movie about this book a while back. I think it was in French, but I remember when it came out. I think it was shown in the U.S. With subtitles. But this is about a man, Jean-Dominique. Did I mention his name? This is by Jean-Dominique Bobby, who was he's a French man who experienced a brainstem stroke. So, and then as a result, he had locked-in syndrome. So this is where all of your kind of cognitive faculties are there. You are completely yourself. You have no basic like cognitive deficits, but you have no connection from your brain to your body, essentially. So you are completely dependent for anyone on movement and all of your personal needs. And then also, you know, have almost no communication, and any communication that you do have is limited to, in his case, eye movement. So he wasn't, I think it's his right eye had to be sewn shut because he couldn't blink it. But his left eye, he was able to blink, and then he had some limited head movement as well. And so using mostly the eye movement, the eye blinking, he was able to communicate with those who would have the patience to communicate with him. And the way that they did this was, so I believe the system was set up by his speech therapist, and I was a speech therapist. I'm no longer working as a speech therapist, but I have a master's degree in speech language pathology, and I worked for about 2 years in the field before I had to resign due to my husband's medical needs. But I certainly employ my speech therapist skills with my husband and even with other patients there at his rehab home every day. So that part was really near and dear to my heart. So the way that they communicated was using the alphabet sequence. So rather than alphabetical order, you know, ABC or whatever the French alphabet is, to make it faster, just more efficient, the alphabet was rearranged by order of the frequency that the letter occurred within the alphabet. So it starts with ESA because E is the most commonly occurring letter in the French alphabet, S is the second most common, and so forth. And so she would, or whoever's communicating would start saying or pointing to the letters of the alphabet. So it'd be like E, S, and then he blinked, like, okay, S, and they would write it down. So he had this notebook in his room, and that was how he would communicate with people. Can you hear the baby? So using that blinking alphabet system, he wrote this memoir with Claude Mendibile, a freelance editor hired by Editions Robert Laffont Fixo, to painstakingly translate the flicker of Bobby's eyelid into words and the fruits of his imagination onto the page. The first thing about this book is just how remarkable in the way that it came about, that it took that painstaking effort and that teamwork of Jean-Dominique and Claude to get his thoughts into words. And he talks about how he would spend his time just, laying there in bed, whatever position he had been left in, sometimes quite uncomfortably. And unless someone came to specifically ask him, are you comfortable? Do you need anything? And took the time to transcribe his answer or just moved him, he could be quite uncomfortable, on a shoulder or hip discomfort or whatever based on the way that he is laying because he can't adjust himself. But he would lay there in bed thinking about and basically writing this memoir in his head so that when Claude arrived to do the transcribing, he kind of knew what he wanted to say already. So he tells basically kind of a series of stories about his life. So he was an editor for the French version of Elle magazine. And so we get bits of his life from there. A lot of the parts that I liked the most were the bits about just his life in the hospital and what that was like. It's like in a seaside area. So there's an area where they can go out and look at the sea. And the writing itself is really beautiful. And I think it would be good if it had been written by anyone, but particularly it is great because of who wrote it and the manner in which it was written. Really elevates it because it's never far from your mind. Even if he's talking about something completely different, you're always brought back to the fact this is a man who is writing this by blinking, and he is paralyzed in bed, completely locked in to the trappings of his physical body. But he has this mind that can still kind of, flutter around like a butterfly. And I thought it was so great the way that he uses memory to really kind of comfort himself and just spend his time. So he would think about just pleasant encounters in his lifetime with his kids or his wife. He would play these things over and over in his mind, or he would let his imagination run wild about things. So it was really neat to kind of be in his head. The thing I liked about this the most was just the idea of being able to really be inside his head. Someone who is locked in is really isolated from the world, and it's like they exist only in their head. And because of the severity of their physical impairments, they essentially only exist as a mind that, unless great efforts have been taken, exist only in their mind, and they can't express that to anyone else. I gave it 4 stars, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're at all interested in like neurology or speech-language pathology, anything like that. Great book and super cool editions. There are 9 more books that are in this matchbook, 4th Estate Matchbook Estate collection. The next book is the Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Wang. This is by Grey Wolf Press, and it was the winner of the Grey Wolf Press Nonfiction Prize, I think in 2018. It doesn't say right here, but Grey Wolf Press is an independent press in the Bay Area, which is pretty local to me, about 100 miles away. I'm a Grey Wolf Press Galley member, although this book came out actually before I was a Galley member, but it was definitely the book that kind of put them on the radar for me, as I saw particularly Russell at Ink and Paper blog talking about this book. The baby needs me. This is Charlotte. We call her Charlie, and she is a Gryffindor, if you couldn't tell. The other 2 claim to be a Hufflepuff and a Ravenclaw, but I think this one, based on her boldness, I think this one might actually be a Gryffindor. Anyhow, we had a stinky diaper. I thought maybe she was going to be able to go back to sleep since that was taken care of. But you weren't having it, were you? What do you see? Books. You want Hermione? Look. Ugh. There you go. That's Hermione. She's a Gryffindor like you. Okay. Anyhow, the Collected Schizophrenias by Esme, Wang is a essay collection written by Esme, who has been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. She is an extremely, no thank you, she's an extremely intelligent woman. She has, I believe it's her master's degree in fashion. She refers to it as an MFA. I didn't look it up, but I know she worked in fashion, so maybe. She also worked in a lab at some point. She's had a very varied, and it sounds like successful career outside of writing, in spite of the fact that she has a severe mental illness, which where she experiences long periods of time sometimes in psychosis. So she looks at many different aspects of life with schizoaffective disorder, or one of these schizophrenias, as she calls it. The first essay, she goes into a little bit more kind of technical detail about the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. The fourth edition had been in use for a long time, and then I'm not sure the years exactly, but just recently, within the last few years, the fifth edition came out, and some significant changes were made in that. Her personal diagnosis did not end up changing, but she talks about how having a diagnosis versus not having a diagnosis, like until she got kind of the correct diagnosis, things were just kind of up in the air, and there's a certain kind of like anchoring that you experience when you actually, there's a name for what you have, that other people have this thing. She's married. There are times she talks about her relationship with her husband and her mother-in-law in particular. Just seems particularly supportive, and a real sense of comfort that she gets from her. Her parents don't live in the country, and so although she communicates with her parents, she doesn't have the physical close relationship that she's able to have with her mother-in-law. So I thought that was really great that she had someone. I would tend to think, in most cases, just the way that we as a civilization kind of deal with and think about people with mental illnesses, that if your son, your baby boy, married a woman with a form of schizophrenia, that it would be really easy to discount her and to maybe even resent her, and now the way that your husband's life is being lived. And while she didn't really go into that as far as that's just where my mind went with it. So I just found it really refreshing, and I just loved her mother-in-law basically for that she kind of took care of her in the way that she did. And actually, I talked about this a little bit in my Nonfiction November TBR when I was talking about this book, and my maternal grandmother had paranoid schizophrenia and bipolar. At the time it was called manic depression. And my mom experienced a lot of trauma growing up because of that, and she moved in at a young age. She moved in at 18 with my dad and his parents, and so her mother-in-law, my paternal grandmother, has kind of really been that source of safety and comfort for my mom. So I think that's why I probably particularly really clung to that. And then also for me personally, because I have this personal relationship, I suppose, with schizophrenia, it was don't let the baby lick the fly swatter. That's just good parenting. Anyhow, not sure exactly where I was. I really enjoyed the Collected Schizophrenias. I wish there was a little bit more kind of personal insight on her part as to what it means to her. And like it's there, but I just kind of wanted more. But I also imagine that when you're writing about something so personal, that there probably is a little bit of guardedness, whether that's guarding, protecting that from other people getting in, or even still protecting from herself. Toward the end, there's some information about new thoughts and new research about autoimmune disorders and their link, and possibly a causal link to mental illness. So I think that's something to look for in the future. That it makes a lot of sense to me that those two would be linked. I gave 4.5 stars to the Collected Schizophrenias. The last book that I've completed for Nonfiction November so far is A Walk in the Woods by Bryson. This copy is quite battered. It has water damage. It's a little frayed. This book spent a lot of time in the hospital with me. But do you want to sit with me? So Bryson, who is a well-known nonfiction author at this point, although this is the first book of his that I have read, kind of chronicles his time with a old high school friend who he hasn't had much contact with over the last many years, them hiking the Appalachian Trail. And what I like about how he writes this is basically in each chapter he intersperses some sort of kind of historical information about the trail itself, or town that he's going through, or whatever it is, some sort of kind of factual information, and then married with his actual experience of what they're doing. I thought this was quite fun. I like Bryson's kind of casual, witty banter kind of writing style, and so I look forward to reading more books of his in the future, and I gave this 4 stars. On to fiction. So Hollow Kingdom by Akira Jane Buxton is a book that I picked up at Old Town Books in Alexandria, Virginia, when I did my DC area trip at the end of October for the Marine Corps Marathon. I started reading this book, I think maybe like the day before we left, and then I was reading this while we were in the hospital and all. So this is kind of a... this book ultimately is a commentary about basically humans and our loss of touch with kind of nature and reality and what really matters due to our addiction to and absorption in our technology. You want up again? She's standing there looking up at the monitor. There we go. Anyhow, so that's kind of the overall message of the book. A crow, as shown on the cover, named ST, which I don't like to swear on my cover, so I will say the S word, turd, is our narrator, our main character. And at the very beginning of the book, so he's a domesticated crow, and he lives with Big Jim and Dennis, the dog. Big Jim the human, Dennis the dog, and Big Jim's eye falls out. And this seems odd. And especially Big Jim really starts exhibiting odd behavior when he tries to eat Dennis. So ST knows that something is up with the humans, or the mofos as he calls them, and he really likes mofos, and he thinks that they are a great species. They are creative, they're imaginative, he likes the things that they have built and the ideas that they have. He just really likes mofos, and he wants to save them. And so he like goes to like Walgreens or CVS or something like that. Oh, what's happening? Do you need a book? You want to see it? Look, oh, there's a doggy. See the dog? So it's ST's mission to basically cure the mofos. He wants to find the reason for what's going on with them and be able to cure them. And so we kind of just go on this adventure with ST and Dennis and other animals that they come across in order to find out what's going on and how they can cure the mofos. So it's just a really fun it's a really fun story with interesting commentary, really good like just witticisms, like the things that ST says, which a lot of times you can tell has been influenced by the way Big Jim had spoken. What was kind of interesting is actually toward the last third or so of the book, as the plot really starts ramping up, it lost a little bit of that. Oh, it's a bear. You see the bear? There's his nose. As the plot really starts ramping up, the story lost a little bit of the really fun, witty writing that I liked, and that kind of came back toward the very end. Oh my goodness. That really fun, whimsical writing style came back towards the end of the book, but it was interesting how my love for the book kind of dwindled a little bit, actually, when the plot was ramping up. So the plot was good, but I really enjoyed the writing. Okay, so ultimately I gave Hollow Kingdom 4 stars. Next up was my book of the month choice for October. This is Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson, and I adored this book. It's pretty short. It's like 250, around 250 pages, which is the perfect length for this book, I think. Okay, I think this might be a nap in the car kind of day today. Who's that? Well, maybe we can get her to fall asleep here while we chat. It's happened before, actually. So, anyhow, Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I'm going to put it down while I talk about it. Lillian is our main character, and she's kind of lost. I'm guessing kind of like late 20s, early 30s. I don't think it actually says. But she has this friend that she spent 1 year with at this kind of exclusive private high school. And basically she ended up taking, the friend's name is Madison, and she ended up taking kind of this big hit for Madison, which resulted in Lillian being expelled instead of Madison, who comes from a very rich, influential family. So the rich, influential family doesn't take this hit, but Lillian does, and she is paid off. They're paid off by Madison's father in order to do so. So they write here and there, write letters to each other, but this, by the way, takes place, I'm guessing, like the early 90s or so. I can't remember. There were a couple of references that made me think that was the case. I can't remember specifically, but there were so many times where I was like, why don't you guys just text each other or something? But that wasn't a thing yet. So it's pre kind of current era technology. Anyhow, Madison sends Lily, in present day, Madison sends Lily a letter saying, I really need to see you. Can you come and stay with me? I have a favor I need to ask you. And so Lillian goes, and Madison ends up asking Lillian if she can be the governess for her stepchildren. Her husband's ex-wife has recently died. There's a set of 10-year-old twins who have some real special needs. And they have been living with their mother. They don't have much of a relationship with their father, but now that the mother is dead, the kids will be coming to live with them, and they need Lillian to help this transitional phase and help take care of these kids. And Lillian's like, there's got to be a catch. Well, only if you consider children catching on fire to be a catch. So it turns out when these twins experience any sort of kind of great emotion, but they just spontaneously combust. They are not harmed, but they can set anything else around them on fire. So Lillian takes on the job despite very unusual circumstances, but basically she needs the money. She kind of wants to be more back in touch with Madison, and you know, there's maybe a hint of like underpants feelings for Madison that she never got to act upon. Lillian and the kids end up staying in this like amazing pad there on the estate property, which is actually converted slaves' quarters. Hi! Do you want to come with me? Come here! I don't know why we're so sad. Oh, it's burying her head on the floor. All right. Okay, so it's now actually a few hours later. The only way the baby was going to sleep is if I put her in the car and we went for a ride. So we went to Target, but I went to like a farther away Target that's nearby my husband's rehab home. So she took a good 25-minute nap or so in the car. Went to see Sam. He was totally passed out. We tried to hang out there for a while to see if he would wake up. He didn't. Got home. Of course, she slept in the car, and she's now back in bed at the moment. And as I was unloading the car, I realized that I forgot the diaper bag at my husband's. So she's taking a nap right now, probably after I film this. When she wakes up, I'll feed her, and then we'll have to go back over there and pick up the diaper bag. But hopefully Sam will be awake. So lots of driving, but yeah. Anyway, I think where I was, and nothing to see here, is explaining basically Lillian's role with these children, these twins. So her job is to be their governess and basically try to not let them catch on fire, particularly not catch anything else on fire like buildings or other people. And it's especially important to really keep this under wraps because Madison's husband, the father of the children, is a very high political figure, and he's kind of in line for Secretary of State. And so having fire kids is certainly not something that is going to help his political career. There's so many great lines just in this. Like, it was cracking me up how, what I love about this book is how serious the situation is, how everything is completely realistic except for the fact that these kids catch on fire. I'm trying to find, here it is. This is the conversation where Madison is telling Lillian about the kids and what her job would be. Okay, I'm just going to read you this one little chunk because I think it's hilarious and it really gets to the point of this is just like a really otherwise realistic contemporary story, than kids on fire. I was in shock, but the images felt easy in my brain, honestly. Children made a fire. That seemed like something I wanted to see. How are they still alive? I asked. It doesn't hurt them at all, she said, shrugging to highlight how dumbfounded she was. They just get really red like a bad sunburn, but they don't hurt. What about their clothes? I asked. I'm still figuring this out, Lillian, she said. I guess their clothes burn off. So they're just these naked kids on fire? I think so. So you can understand why we're worried. I mean, Jasper is their father, though I'm fairly certain that this comes from Jane's family. That's the kid's mother. It's just, I loved it. So essentially that's what we follow. Lillian becomes the governess for these kids, and her world really just gets consumed by taking care of these kids, and she establishes a great relationship with them, and that part of it is really sweet. Meanwhile, you have the kind of bigger story of the family, and if and when or how they're going to be able to integrate the twins in with the rest of the family. And I love the way that this ridiculous thing, like these kids catching on fire, is this really graphic expression of the like emotional trauma these kids have gone through, and that becomes more explored as the book goes on. And I love this book so much. I tore through it. I want to read everything else by Kevin Wilson. 5 stars for Nothing to See Here. Another 5-star book is the first book that Sam and I have read for Believathon this month, and that is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And this book has been seen a lot on BookTube, and that is what piqued my interest, and I happened to find a copy of it at a local independent, one of the very few independent bookstores that we have. Essentially, there's this town called the Protectorate, and they believe that every year they have to sacrifice a baby. So the youngest baby the youngest baby when sacrifice day comes around has to be sacrificed to the witch in the wood. And they sacrifice this baby because sacrificing a baby every year keeps the Protectorate safe from the witch. Meanwhile, there's this witch in the wood, and every year around the same time, she finds a completely helpless, abandoned baby in the wood that has just been left to die. And so she takes the baby, she feeds it, cares for it, she feeds it sunlight, and she takes it across the other side of the mountain to the Free Cities and finds a good, loving home for this child. And then these children are known as star children. So our main character, Luna, is to be one of these star children. She's the youngest. She is the child to be sacrificed. And the witch mistakenly feeds her moonlight instead of sunlight, and thus her name becomes Luna. And because she's been given moonlight instead of starlight, she's going to be a magical child. And so it is about how Luna is raised by the witch and her good friend, the swamp monster, and a tiny, very enormous dragon named Furion, and how these worlds end up kind of colliding and how things go from there. Really love this book. And there was a while back, I don't remember what the book tag was, but there was a prompt in some book tag that was, what is a like modern book that you think will eventually be a classic? And I definitely think that this could qualify as a future classic. Harry Potter is the obvious answer to that, and I think in some ways it kind of already is de facto. It's kind of de facto already a children's classic, but I definitely think that The Girl Who Drank the Moon would be in line for a future classic, and it did win the Newbery Medal Award as well. One of the things that makes this book so great, and I think it would be a great book to like study in school for maybe like 6th graders or something, and would make it such a good reread, is that there are so many layers to this story. There's so much depth to it beyond just the main plot, and looking at othering and keeping someone in fear in order to have power over them. So many great things about this book. I highly recommend it for yourself, for a middle grade reader in your life, just for anybody who knows how to read. We should all have our hands on this book. So these are the 6 books that I've read so far in the month of November. 1 for Believathon, 3 for Nonfiction November, and 2 general fiction books that I really enjoyed. It has been a really great reading month already. I have really enjoyed all of these books, and I highly recommend all of them. I'd love to know, are you participating in Believathon or Nonfiction November? Have you read any of these books? Thank you for watching. See you on the tubes.